Welcome back to this episode of the On Patrol podcast. I am Wyndhurst Productions, joined with...
Fightin Kentuckian.
And in this episode 33 of the On Patrol podcast, we're going a little different direction, something out of maybe our normal comfort zone as far as scale of models that we're using. And we're going to be looking at Age of Hannibal and using 6mm miniatures. But before we get into all that, as we always like to do, we want to start with our alibis, caveats, and piggybacks from our last episode, which was our interview with Brigade Games. I'm going to kick that over to Fightin Kentuckian to start us off.
So loved our last episode. It's always fun to talk to people in the hobby. We got a lot of good comments about that, and I just give us ideas. I know Jeff in Ashland, he started talking like how do we submit messages and things like that and ideas. We get rule sets all the time from people out there. We get messages about periods they want covered or those things. Please post on the On Patrol Facebook page, post on any one of our chats, message us individually. But just get the clamor. I would probably say my primary recommendation is post on the On Patrol Facebook page if you have it. If not, shoot us a private message or reach out to the email from the podcast and YouTube, and we'll get to you. But we want to create discussion and conversation, and we really want to talk about, whatever people want to talk about. And especially, we all come from different walks of life of this hobby. So I just wanted to put that out there for good measure. So the rest of the alibis and caveats and piggybacks are nothing to really add from our last episode. I look forward to discussing projects and what's going on and how stupid I'm being. And you didn't hear before we started recording, I talked about Wyndhurst about a new project that may be on the horizon. And he, I think I almost killed him from laughing so hard. So, we'll hear about that more later. But really looking forward to having more discussion with you guys and figuring out, rule sets you want us to review, people you want us to talk to, things that you want to be discussed, like in this hobby, this big swath of hobby we have. I never thought I would game 6mm. Never thought it in my life. And, we had some people ask us about it. We ourselves were curious about it. Another YouTube channel we'll talk about was super popular, wrote the whole rule set on it. So here we are. But I'll kick it over to Wyndhurst for his alibis, caveats, and piggybacks.
Thanks, Kentuckian. Yeah, so as far as from our last episode, I think it was pretty straightforward. It was a great interview with a great individual who was apparently extremely influential in, I guess, really the early era of historical wargaming in the United States. As far as bringing suppliers over, or as a supplier for manufacturers overseas. That's one thing we love about getting to do these interviews, the opportunity to talk to these individuals who are very like-minded hobbyists, very passionate like we are. So if there's somebody or a business or an individual within the hobby space that you feel is like, man, I feel like I'd like to know more about them, I think they've been around or they're very influential or significant for the hobby, and you think they'd be a good person for us to bring on and kind of share more of their story, always let us know. Like Kentuckian said, Facebook's definitely the best place to comment on those, or YouTube comments on this video. If you want to, we read every comment. And we've got people who email us on patrol. I think it's just onpatrol at gmail.com. I'll make sure there's a link in the description of these episodes with our actual On Patrol email. So if you do have questions, you want to reach out to us, that's another option. We have talked about doing a paint and chat, either a live or pre-recorded with pre-submitted questions, as almost like a bonus, not necessarily as a regular episode, but as a filler, because we have had a number of people ask about, do you take questions, or we have ideas. And there's some things we'd like to talk about that you can't really put into an entire episode. And as you know, we're long-winded, and we can't get an episode to be under about 2 hours.
We try.
Kentuckian, almost every month, Kentuckian's like, man, we're only, I don't see us talking more than an hour and a half or something on this. I'm like, really? And but we always want to make sure we're doing the topic justice. And the interviews will be longer because we just want to keep talking with them because they're great individuals. We've been very fortunate. So keep an eye out for that. It might wait till a bit later in the year after Kentuckian's got to his new location and settled in. But we'll see. I don't have anything else, Kentucky. If you want to start out the introduction for the episode, and we'll get going.
Okay, what are we talking about today? A little rule set called Age of Hannibal, right? So from chariots to pilums, we're going to be diving back into a rule set that attempts to streamline basically this period to play across antiquity and everything in between. So it's got a little bit of that. If you go to the army list, you've got classical, Greeks and Persians to the successors, but it's in that sweet spot, I would say, of antiquity. And this is no easy task. If you follow the Little Wars page at all, or those guys over there, Greg and all of them, like amazing YouTube channel, really inspires a lot of people in the hobby. And there's been a lot of buzz about this rule set. It's been out for several years now. Me and Wyndhurst played our first game of it.
Four. It would have been at least 4 years ago.
3 or 4 years ago, and so. It's been out there for a minute, but we really, in the vein of ancients, and when we dove into Hell Caesar, we were kind of curious. We had a lot of comments. This is another ode back to our alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. A lot of people talked about Midgard. They talked about other rule sets, and we said, that is, I think, if to give a fair evaluation, you at least, if you've listened to us at all, we have some biases. We have some things that we like to play. But it's good to play other games, and it's good to get out of it like, hey, what are the people wanting to get out of it? And so we wanted to dive back into the world of ancients to talk this rule set because it did come on, several years ago onto the I will say the forefront like a storm, especially when they did their Pyrrhic campaign. But I don't want to waste any more time on that. And we want to get into diving into this rule set and giving it a rules review. So grab your spear, your shield, your gladius, or your siege engine, and join us on this episode of On Patrol. I'm going to say 72, so DJ out there can say I got the episode wrong. I know it's 33. No, I'm kidding. A lot of people were, I jacked that up last time, but look forward to...
That was my fault. I told him the wrong thing. Like a good officer, he listened to his NCO.
I like to, let's go ahead and dive into this and talk about this wonderful rule set. That maybe we'll have a different view of that by the end of this, but let's talk about it. Age of Hannibal. I'll let you take it away, Wyndhurst.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kentuckian. So real quick, just in case this is one of your first rules review episodes you've listened to of us, we're going to go over 10 categories. Each category's got a 10-point scale, so we're scoring out of 100. We're going to be looking at presentation, what are the rules kind of trying to achieve, gatekeeping, playability, rules, mechanics, and nuances, opponents, like the player community, support from the publisher, support from third party, our strongest reasons for against the rules, and then the it factor. So we're going to go over all those categories, and after each one, Kentucky and I are going to score them 1 out of 10. And while we don't pick rules normally that we're totally unfamiliar with, so we haven't ever scored anything, I think, even close to 50%, because we just don't have the time to pick pick up a set of rules that we're probably going to hate. So we're not going to say it's a bad set of rules, most likely, but our scales are weighted because we only really review rules that we're willing to play. So keep that in mind if you feel like we're being overly generous, or if you listen to all of our rules reviews and you're like, oh, you guys always score like above this. That's probably why.
Well, I just want to at least caveat that with saying we'll be objective, and
Yes.
we're very critical of mechanics or things where if you have a fan of that rule set, they won't be. To even include, one of our favorite rule sets of like Hail Caesar, or there are really things we like about bolt action, and there are some things that we're like, oh, we wish this could have been done better, but. A lot of people have said in the past, like, we do have a positive spin on it, I think, to some degree, even when we offer criticism. So,
So to clarify, we're not, if there's a set of rules that we've looked at with our experience and we're like, no, I'm not going to enjoy that, we're not going to bother reviewing it on here. So it's going to be something we're at least willing to play, which means we're probably not, we're going to be critical, and we're going to say if here's its flaws and its faults. But it's not going to probably be like this. We're never going to put a set of rules on here and tell you this is garbage. You should not play this, because we wouldn't pick it up to play in the first place if we thought that.
That's true. We don't want to be the person that adds to your your grievances
Yeah.
if we don't think you should play the game. But go
Moving on
ahead.
swiftly. Yeah. All right. So I'll start us off with presentation. So on this one, we're looking: is it a book? Is it a PDF? Do they have an ebook? They do have a book, hard copy. Which, if you're watching the video, Kentuckian's holding up right now. They do have a PDF which you can print, as I have. I'm holding it up. I know that's something Kentuckian's always hitting on. Being able to have a PDF is a big deal, so that is nice. Kentuckian's got some points about some differences between them. I'll let him cover because I only have the PDF. How's it laid out? It's got a color cover. The PDF is black and white all the way through, otherwise, and it's just illustrations. There's no photos. I'm not sure. Kentucky, is the book the same, or has it got color images throughout?
It's got that purple tint to it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I printed mine in black and white, so it probably would have been purple tint. It is double column. It's pretty standard kind of layout, as most rule sets are that review. It's going to be double column. It's got charts, not too many. It's got some diagrams for some things. Is it easy and intuitive to read? For me, for the most part, it was. There are some areas in rules mechanics that I felt it was lacking. And so, you good, man?
Yeah, yeah. If the listener or viewer is watching, I wanted to make sure I got the cards because there was something
good.
that
That's
I
good,
was
'cause I
gonna
didn't grab any.
talk the cards too.
Yeah. So I do think it is fairly intuitive to read. It is a simple set of rules, and I'll talk a little bit more of that later. It does build upon itself. It does have a table of contents. It does not have an index. It does have one of the things I think is a must in all sets of rules, and I'm always harping on this. Like Kentuckian harps on the PDF, I harp on a quick reference sheet. It does have a quick reference sheet, and for the rules, it's fairly decent. It's got everything you need. It actually, when you print it off, it'll have a unit sheet on the back, so you kind of see all the basic stats for all the units. And then on the other side, it's just a sequence of play and everything. It does have examples, so that's one thing we look at. Does it have examples of individual mechanics? Which it does. It has like top-down diagrams. And there's also a combat section example where they run through like all the phases of a round of combat with diagrams kind of showing, all right, this happens, and this is how you go through it. And that's very useful. So overall, I'd say, under the presentation is pretty solid for, a small kind of independently printed rule book. I have seen small rule books like this that have no illustrations or at all, and it's just kind of all text and everything, and those can be a little hard to read. It almost feels like a textbook of some kind or an operations manual. But this is a nice balance, that even the text they choose is, thematic, you might say, for the for ancients. So it's nice. I've given even Warlord criticism before, sometimes having too many images and stuff in some of the rules. This one has a nice balance, I think. I think presentation is decent. Kentuckian, what are your thoughts on presentation?
Presentation I really like. I had the first edition, I believe, PDF, and this edition. They said they updated some things in it. We'll talk about that when we get to mechanics and why they updated it. I like some of the pictures are absolutely gorgeous. I don't know who drew those, if it was somebody in the club or they got somebody.
The cover was done by one of their club members.
I know that one. That's not even the one I'm specifically. Hannibal with the lazy eye. I'm kidding. I know he loses his eye going through the marsh pits around Rome. But like you see the general. I'm looking at specifically page 12. Some of the other artwork is pretty solid. That they're fighting. I really like that stuff. It just gets me in the period of it. I love pretty pictures of models, but I know an independent print company, sometimes models are inspiring. I was just on an Ancients group the other day, and even though Warhammer Historicals, and we've talked about it, has been dead, people will use the Alexander book to like paint their models. People will use old dead rule sets to be like, hey, I love the way the unit is displayed in there. I think that's a lot to ask. The guys at Little War are normally they're top-notch guys. I know they've got their own jobs and everything else like that. They run a fantastic YouTube page, so I'm sure they're busy. That's something to me. could have added a decent amount to this game. Especially, I think 6mm is not gamed a lot, and some of the videos they've done with the amazing terrain and Pyrrhic armies and Roman armies when they played the Trebia and all that stuff. I thought some of those armies were nicely presented. Some of those pictures could have inspired people, but you might be on the other end and be like, well, look, no 6mm army in human history has ever inspired anybody to paint. But I still think that they had some impressive armies that could have added. So those would be my critiques on at least those parts of it. Go ahead.
The rule book itself, how many pages is the rule book? Because the PDF is 24 pages.
This is 60, and I'm saying with everything, I'm getting to the last page. It's like 60, is that 59, 60 pages, 61? It doesn't have, the last 3 pages aren't listed page numbers, but it would be like around 61, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so the PDF is a little bit smaller, but the PDF included the cards. No.
This doesn't have the cards in it in the book, and we'll talk about that. I guess now is probably a good time to bring that up. Between the differences, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say to your earlier point, so the printed book is about $28, and the PDF is $16. So because you have the printed book, and we're talking about the cost of adding color photos on like picture models, do you feel like that price point is a good one for what you get in the book? Or do you feel like, okay, I understand they cut out a lot of these color photos in order to keep the price down?
Most rule books, are like $50, somewhere in there, right? If I'm
I love the ones we're buying because there's a lot of stuff in them.
The mediums, like $50 on some modern rule sets. I would say, man, I hate to beat the guys up too much. I would say it's a little bit underwhelming for around $30.
Okay. I think that's again, guys, we said we'd be critical.
I think it's underwhelming for $30. And the biggest thing that I want to talk right now is how is it laid out, and is it easy, intuitive to read, and then the sections build on each other. I agree with everything Wyndhurst said. I think it is. These guys know gaming. Like, I get that to some degree. So I think they understand, like, what are the basic questions. I think there are some walkthroughs that are easy, but I'll bring up my point with where things are and if they're read, and then you can go into it. The one thing that without even knocking them, that I think is different from the rulebook to the PDF is, I just want to bring up how this came to fruition. I was gaming with a friend who is a veteran wargamer, Mike. Shout out to you. My French partisan player in our escalation league around here. Veteran wargamer. He's played a lot of games. I give him the book a lot during our game, and I'm like, hey, you can quick reference it. Ordered 2 books. Greg only sent me 1. I shot him an email. He said he's going to rectify it. So, I don't want to. Greg, they were on it, I'll say. So there was a mistake in my order, but they were on it. So no issue on that. But I gave, as I had the PDF and everything, and I could quickly reference it. I've read the rules several times, and I was trying to walk a new player through it who is new wargaming as well. I was like, hey, here's the book. We lay the cards down. We'll talk about those in game mechanics, and we get to the stratagem card. And it says, I'm showing the viewer, it says, go to see page 21. And it says, an army is detached, boldly swing around. And so it says, see page 21 of the rule book, go to this rules, and you will find the flank attack that you can run on your host of this game, Matt Doyle. That is me. And we go to that, and it's the combat resolution table in the rule book I printed off. Now, in the actual PDF, it's going to be the right page. But I hand him this book, and I'm like, hey, go to page 21, read the stratagem real quick. And I was like, I don't want to challenge you like we're supposed to be playing against each other, but here's where it's at. You can read it. I didn't know he had flank attack. I was like, hey, if you have any stratagems, look in the book where they're supposed to be, and here's the book. And I just handed it to him like that. For 5 minutes, I looked across from Mike, and I was just like, hey, take your time. I'm going to use the restroom. I'm going to get something to drink. Now, maybe that's on me and Mike. We weren't talking out loud, and we were trying to be secretive to play the game. But he's like, Matt, this is really poorly written. He's like, what does combat resolution have to do with this strategy I'm like, and I was like, oh man, must be a mix up. And he's like, I'm like, where are you at? And I'm reading it, but I'm reading the PDF. So it's like me and him are doing the Abbott and Costello, who's on first. Like we're saying two different things and just kind of talking past each other. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? It's right there. I can read it. I don't know what stratagem you have, but I'm looking at the PDF across the table from him. So we found it out. I just think that's something that if you get the PDF or you get the rule book, some people like having stuff in their hands. I am one of those people. That's something you need to pay attention to. There are sections that are. I also want to give an ode back to what we talked about with Rick Priestley. There are people that have played games so much, or they play them in a club so much, that the rules aren't written down and they just understand them. And I think that that's a good lead in to some gaps and seams in this very simple rule set that Wyndhurst will be able to kind of talk about now, which I see is kind of why that happened. But go ahead, I'll ask Wyndhurst about his kind of questions with not getting into the rules, but just were there some gaps and seams that you had in the book?
Yeah. So the two ones that I ran into, and again, the layout and the building made sense. But one of the first things you do is build your commander. They have this really nice. They have commander traits, which we always love. Kentuckian, I always rave about those kind of things. And your commanders can attach to units and give their stat bonuses to the unit, but it doesn't tell you what their base stats are. You roll their traits, and then it says go to this page for all the details on those traits, which can affect their stats. And then it goes into recruiting soldiers, and it talks about stats, but there's no information on what are the commander's base stats or anything. And we've asked other people, and we've talked to people, and we haven't gotten a straight answer yet. I have sent an email to Little Wars asking for some clarification, but they haven't gotten back to me yet. I did send it kind of late, like right before the weekend. So no foul on them. I don't expect them to work over the weekend. But it just wasn't clear. And then the movement is a little confusing. And again, it's kind of like reading this, having done the interview with Rick, it definitely felt like they didn't put this in here because it's so clear to them because they played so much. So there was some confusion in movement and the orders. And so you might ask, with even discrepancies like Kentucky mentioned, what about an errata? Well, they have one. Well, it's called an errata on their site. It's the second edition errata, but subtext is a line by line summary. So it's not a traditional errata where it's like, here's corrections to the rules or here's questions people have. Because they had a first edition and then a second edition, they've literally gone through page by page and said, like, this is what's changed and kind of why. But they're not explaining all the rules in detail, and they're not making corrections to anything that was wrong. So it's not really an errata in the traditional sense. So, like, I went there for clarification and couldn't find any because I don't know if no one's just brought it up or most of the people playing it, it's instinctive for them, but it wasn't for me. So, yeah, those were some, like, I just felt like I ran into. And I'll save some other thoughts for another.
Yeah, the game. Yeah. So, all in all, another thing that I want to highlight is the quick reference sheet. I think the quick reference sheet is really good. I'm looking. It's like the back one has the unit reference sheet, so I think it's like 43 in the PDF. I think it's pretty sound. I printed off the unit reference sheet as well for like a front and back, so I could kind of quickly look. The only thing that I would have, I think the guys at Little Wars TV know that I'm like dense as a box of rocks, so they know that like the wargamer, anybody that holds himself out there to build a rule set, hats off to you. You're awesome. Like, keep doing it. And even if you're Little Wars TV that are at their zenith, or if you're somebody just a mom and pop or a gamer that wants to do it, like, keep doing it. Don't be discouraged. But I do understand that like getting everybody on the same page is difficult, whether you're talking about a military operation or getting it through my thick skull, a Kentucky native. Like, I get it. And so I try to be gracious to some degree, but my biggest My biggest hit was, I think, with the combat factors or some of the things like that when we talked about, what was it, missile fire notes or like combat. I think it talked about the modifiers. Like it definitely highlighted to you, like, hey, there might be some other modifiers that go in there. I do enjoy in the rules, especially when you're talking about Age of Hannibal, where there's not a million special rules, all right? There's some pretty constant. They've kept it in a sliver, I will say, of period, like classical antiquity frame, where they've got the Pila rule, they've got some of those things. And I just wish there was a spot listed, or adding it to the quick reference sheet about those things, like whether it be, phalanx, whatever a special rule is, would have done a lot there, because you can go, if you printed out your army list or anything else like that, or having that page, I might add a quick reference sheet, just a page of the special rules. But I think that could have, again, we're just looking to like, hey, what could have added to the game?
Yeah, so can I piggyback off that?
Yes,
You make
yes,
a good point.
yes.
So they do give you an army building, like a sheet, so you can put stuff, and there's an area you can put notes at the bottom. And I assumed they thought you would add your special rules.
Yeah.
But honestly, for the quick reference sheet, I don't need all the unit stats on the back of the sheet if I have my own army list. This would a good spot to put all the special unit rules. It would have fit on one side, and then if my opponent says, "Oh yeah, I have this rule," I can look and keep my mind on. Okay, they've got Peelam. What's that do? Okay, maybe I don't want to charge them. Right
Yeah.
away, or they got failing. I think that would have been more useful than putting all the unit stats on the back.
Well, and the thought between with that is like, me and you have talked about this with Hail Caesar, another ancient game, is um, knowing your opponent. Like if you're a good commander, and knowing your opponent, knowing those things, I think having that quick sheet would have just added a lot, because normally if you're building an army and you're playing against somebody, or you've been handed an army sheet and it's your first time gaming, you at least get the gist of your army. But that quick reference sheet of like what some of the mechanics would have done, I just don't think you would have needed a lot of space. I get it. There's not a lot of space on this free thing here, but we got the fate table, we've got the turn sequence, great missile fire results. Like I feel you could have squeezed a column or a block somewhere in there that says like Pila, phalanx, da 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 da. This is what it does, and it just would have helped. But again, this is me. We're being objective as what we think. Having a QRS, you're ahead of the curve. Greg and all them,
Yes.
you're ahead of the curve. The unit reference sheet, I do get the intent behind it. You want to be able to kind of think, maybe my army doesn't have pikes. Maybe I can see what a baseline stat is behind pikes, or see that they do terrain. So like that was your intent to be doing that. The special rules, there were just a few times, especially when you have so much combat, if you're fighting a big battle,
Yeah.
there were a few times I did not add Pila, I did not do those things. And even if it's a reference in the combat, what is it called? Combat notes, or if it was a reference, other than saying go to this, go to unit rolls and modifiers with possible modifiers for support, terrain, unit abilities, etc. It's like, okay, once you get the play down and you don't have that hook or something there on a page screaming to you, and again, me and Wyndhurst we don't say that we're steeped in Age of Hannibal. I have a lot of armies in Age of Hannibal. I've got the rule set. We've played it a dozen times. I think both of us have, but it just something would have helped.
Yeah, and I get that they're trying to go for simple, fast play, easy rules, and I mean, I can't tell you how many times in more complex, gritty rules I've forgotten special abilities and stuff. But I feel like there was just a missed opportunity, because some of the information on the quick reference sheet may have been less important. Like, I mean, even like the miscellaneous on the unit reference, like they're not. How many games are going to have artillery and a fortified camp, stuff like that? You could probably have dropped that section and added a couple, but you could also just argue, well, put it on your army list and read your army list. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is just our personal preference and
Yep.
stuff like that.
No, fair points. Is there anything, we talked the diagrams, we talked how it laid out, easy and intuitive. I do think they're war gamers. They know how to get to these things. The only thing to highlight is I think they know a few things so much, especially commanders. There's a way to play it that I think is very reasonable, but it's open ended enough to say there's a gap where you can fit some things in there. The diagrams make sense. The examples in the book were great, and they use several examples of like, hey, this is no go, this is a go. Awesome. The QRS, I think the QRS is very good. I think they did a good job in getting the meat and potatoes on that sheet. My only wish list item, is a wish list item. The indexes, I'm just looking at the book. I can't remember, and I didn't write it in my notes. Does the PDF have an index?
No, it does not. It does have
Okay.
table contents, but not an index.
Okay, and again, you're talking a short rule book, right? If you're at 50 or 60 pages, when me and Wyndhurst played this 4 or 5 years ago, we were like, you really like you only had to go back and forth in like 11 pages, and so we were I think the meat of the rules are in half a dozen pages, and so we were like, hey, you really don't need a QRS to some degree. So I'll punch back against myself, Little Wars, and say it's very short. It's an easy flick, or if you've got something tabbed to get there. But I'm curious to ask Wyndhurst, what did you score this bad boy?
Yeah, well, I will. I do want to add because I think it affected my score. Considering I've said, to me, I just feel like I've said a lot of negative, but two really positive things. They have a whole section on sieges, which is something that we haven't done yet, but Kentuckian are always talking about doing. So we appreciate somebody going through the effort of giving us rules for sieges, and it includes several scenarios with army lists in the book. So even for an independent, small scale company, kind of rules, they give you a lot in the rule book. And I don't know if Kentuckian finishing, but the terrain cards, which we'll talk about in mechanics a little bit more, they're in the PDF. They're available for free on their site, so they're not in the rule book. So they do give you a lot of stuff in there. So for scoring wise, I gave him an 8. I think it's a very respectable score. I think there's a few things that knock it down, but I think for trying to be a fast play and trying to keep things simple, some of the would-be nice-haves aren't necessary items. I'm not going to necessarily ding them for, so just some of those things that, like, my confusion in the flow, things like that knocked it down a little bit.
Okay.
What about you, Kentuckian?
I'm normally the candy man, so it's good to see me be the Grim Reaper for once. I gave it a 6.8, and I want to defend myself before Little Wars comes after me or any fans of them. It's a really good book for what it is, but I think it's got to be objective. We've got to be objective in the sense of, like, does this thing stand up to Midgard, Hail Caesar, other rule sets, and I think Bela Ludi, is quick play. I think Hail Caesar's quick play ancients, L'Art de Guerre, whatever you want to talk about, whatever rule set. Like, let's put it 10 toes down, as the kids say, against that, and even for quick play. How is it laid out? Easy and intuitive. I think a lot of the 6.8 that carries this book it's written by wargamers. So I think the language and the playability is there. I think it's decent diagrams, but the things that I'm used to in rule books that are missing are what get me, I think, to those like 8s, and that's the pretty pictures. Your art's great, guys. If somebody in the club drew that, it's great. If you had it commissioned, it's great. You guys have fantastic armies, and I know it drives the print costs up. If I'm paying $40 for a book that's got cool pictures in it, that's my cup of tea. And I really do like that me and Wyndhurst aren't on the same page on this one, because I just, for the wish I could have had on the QRS, or some of the examples being with your actual models on those beautiful tables I know you guys own, I think that would have gotten me, you're talking a whole another point for me out of that, and that gets you into this 8 range. But for me, your guys' writing, the fact that wargaming in and out, is what gets this to a 6.8. I think you guys lift the fact that you did bare bones on the diagrams and pictures and those things to a 6.8. So I know I'm the Grim Reaper on category 1, but
I think that's fair because I don't have the hard copy book, and I have other like Bela Ludi stuff who, I believe is cheaper, that has full color photos, and it's about the same size. So I might have felt a little different if I had paid $30 for the rule book and felt it was less than in that regard. But you
Yeah,
want to take
but
us on to the next section?
yeah. So, what is the rule set trying to achieve? So, I mean, they tell you the goal is, a fun, a fun. Let me read our questions first, right? What is the goal? Is it fun? Is it a skirmish game? It is a mass rank game. Who's the intended audience? Does it meet the goal? What are the shortfalls in the goal? So, I think the goal is to recreate, these big epic size battles from classical antiquity period on a 6x4. And me and Wyndhurst, this is a period like near and dear to our heart. I think we're both, we game a lot of periods. We would consider ourselves World War II gamers, Western gamers, French and Indian, and Ancients is probably up there in our top, air power, naval, and all the other stuff we're getting into. But, what is its goal? Is it a fast play rule set for antiquity and the classical period? Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I think there's a lot of fun to it. I think the guys have taken the skeletons and bones of the Chipco system that they reference if you watch their videos, and they apply it. They're like, hey, this can go outside of medieval times. Like, let's go, let's roll with this thing. And I think they did a bang up job. I think it does very well for what is the rule set trying to achieve. Who is the intended audience? I think it's going to be for the people that are, the more, I would say there's this like bell curve or sliding scale of wargamers and rule sets. And if you have somebody that loves a period so much that they're steeped in it, they don't really like the fast play. They want to know the difference between the gyrospids and the regular phalanx, right? The silver shields and this, and they want it down to like some details, and they want this unit at this year period to be very different than how it was. And if you like fast play games where it's like, I want to get a feel and a flavor in 2 hours or less, for this type of thing, well, to do a huge battle or a campaign, I'd put their campaign books in this rule book, especially since they're free. Like, this is a great set for that. So I think if that's your jam, yes. I consider myself definitely I love ancient history and the classics, but I consider myself enjoying the benefits of a fast-paced rule set, and this is right up my alley. Does it meet that goal? I think so. I think they cut as much as they could for what I've seen of other ancient games to get you a good game with a flavor and a feel of the period, with very generic base unit types and special add-on rules to give you that. I would almost add it to like the bolt action flavor of, here's some national rules, here's some unit special rules. It gives you this bill, and just in a few factors on like combat resolution factors, rally factors, and your what was the other one? Your missile fire stuff, like just a few of those things. It's like, man, these feel like javelin guys in ancient combat. These feel like Roman legionnaires. These feel like Pyrrhic phalanx guys. So I think it meets that goal tenfold. What are the shortfalls in that goal? I think it's not going to be for somebody who wants the nitty gritty detail, and I think it's going to appeal more to casual gamers, fun gamers, club games, kind of in the sense of quick, fast. I think that's going to be your goal. I think the tournament people that play Ancients and Classical may not like it. I could see some ways, just looking at the rules, that's not my mindset, but I could see some ways where, people could probably do some shenanigans with building lists if you didn't agree, like, hey, you're going to build, a Pyrrhic army, and you're going to, I'm trying to think, the shenanigans I mainly saw was like, if you didn't stay to what they had in, they give you some design notes in the army list of like, hey, here's what a Achaemenid Persian army would fight. And they would mainly have a lot of skirmishers, and you're like, oh, we're going to have mercenary hoplites as half the army. That could be an issue. But I think it's the shortfalls would be the nitty grittiness of some of the other detail rule sets where You just don't have that. You're going to have some generic stats, some bolt-on stuffs that gives you that differentiation, and then you're going to have a fun time. But yeah, those are my thoughts on those outlines. What about you, Wyndhurst, on what is the rule set trying to achieve?
So as far as like what's the goal, I agree. I mean, it says on the cover, it's Age of Hannibal, fast play battles of antiquity. That's their goal. It's meant to be fast play battles. I would add that it's meant to be for large scale tactical warfare. Like again, our our go-to rules and scale for this period is 28 millimeter, and typically rules like Hail Caesar, which are have a lot more to them, and they're bigger, prettier models. Um, so I don't think this is targeted at people who love to paint necessarily and want big, pretty armies. You want to have lots of models on the table. You want to look at the table and feel like you're commanding, the thousands of soldiers that would have been there, because you do kind of get that impression when you look at it. They do look like huge armies. Even the smaller games I played still looked like, I was commanding huge armies. And you do get the kind of maneuver and tactical mindset, and I think that's kind of where they're more going to. I agree with Kentuckian that the stats are nice and simple, and they give you the right flavor. So when I was playing my Greeks versus Romans, the phalanx Greeks felt like they were using a distinct tactic, and the Romans with Roman drill and Pelham felt like they had a distinct tactic. Um, and even in their own review video, where they kind of reviewed their own rules, they straight up said if you like the nitty gritty of ancients, if you're somebody who is really into this period, then this rule set's probably not for you, because that's not the target. The target isn't somebody who's really steeped in the knowledge and wants to have all the nuances of this period. It's meant really to give you almost more of a tactical feel in this period. What is the command and control like in this period, as opposed to, I think, all the little nitty gritty details about the different unit types and weapon types and formations and things like that. Again, talking about formations, like everybody is on the same base size. Everybody's on a 40 by 40 base, regardless of number of models or unit type. So they really simplify that. I think it meets the goal. I think that is their goal, is fast play, ancient antiquity battles, and I think they give you. It is fairly fast played, and you really get to feel like you're commanding large armies. I would disagree a little bit with Kentuckian on the shortfall, where he is saying that it's the shortfall being it doesn't have the nitty gritty. I don't think that was an intent, so I wouldn't call that a shortfall from me, because they, having watched their review video and them saying that is not who this is for, I'm not going to hold that against them. It definitely doesn't have that, so if that's what you're looking for, you will be disappointed. But for me, the shortfall, and this is a shortfall that I have seen in a lot of these types of rules that are meant to be simple, small print, fast play, is some of the mechanics are overly simple. Like, yes, you don't have to have nitty gritty, but you simplify some things to the point that you even might lose some of that tactical feel. I know somebody on the Facebook page, just a second, on the Facebook page was commenting that they didn't feel medium or heavy cavalry felt right, because they're so simplified that they house rule some stuff. And we'll talk about house ruling later, but I think in the goal of trying to make it simple and fast play, you can almost sacrifice too much. And to me, that's where it suffers. That's the shortfalls. Is some things, combat is a single dice roll with a single modifier, essentially. And while that is an advantage, which we'll talk about maybe in gatekeeping, you also kind of lose the feel of the weight of hit maybe that some of your units have, because they are trying to simplify things so much. So for me, that's really kind of the shortfall, is the oversimplification. You want to score it?
Yeah, no, just to your point, I do agree. I'm probably using a measuring stick that they're discounting from the get-go of what their intent is. I would concur with some of your thoughts on the oversimplification, but I still think, you know, if you're buying a rule set, and even if you're setting in that period, you have to have some interest in it. So my only thought would be is like, that's like walking a tightrope, right? No rule set's going to be perfect, and I would say if you are interested in the period, we'll go on to some of the other things where I think I'll highlight. I'll jump up or down on a little bit more differences, but I guess on their overarching, like, what are they trying to achieve? What did they set out to do, and did they get that? Even with internal or external critiquing of it, if that's, whether you think it's allowed or um, fair would probably be the better word. Like, hey, it's not that it's apples and oranges. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think they set out to meet a mission. I think they met that in spades, and I think they came up with it. I think they, playing the Chipco game and everything, they were like, we could apply this to some other kind of periods with the same flavor and fast play, and I think they did it very well. So I'm going to give them an 8.5 on that.
Yeah, I was very close to that as well. I gave them an 8, and I think something that's really telling, so for the audience, before we start recording, as we've been playing this over the last month, one thing Kentuckian really laments is having multiple armies in different scale. But he was satisfied enough, having played this, to see the value in having 6 mil armies for those really big battles he wants to play. So regardless of what rules he ends up go with, these rules did at least show him that there is value in that big tactical level. So I think that speaks very strongly to them. One thing I had thought about adding in as a note was this is a very good intro set of rules for 6mm gaming.
1,000%.
Yeah, and we'll see at the end, if how we score it, if we really feel like it is the go-to 6 mil. But I think it's a really great way to get into the scale.
I want to talk about that in the next section. So lead that. I think that's going to kind of send that discussion that route.
Yeah. So you 8.5 for you and 8 for me.
Yep.
So I think we're both kind of right around in that kind of high average.
Yep.
So moving on, the next one is gatekeeping. That's the entry threshold to the system. So we're going to look what gatekeeping mechanics are there that make it either difficult or easier for players to get into. The cost of models, size of manufacturer of the models, specific size, things like that. Can you play with other manufacturers' models, and then book supplements, new editions? Some rules come out with new edition pretty much every year. We won't name them because they're not allowed to be named here.
Just announced 11th edition.
Yeah, so when you guys are sick of that, come to us. We'll point you in the right direction. But anyway, so starting with gatekeeping mechanics. I always harp on this for rules if they have very bespoke dice or charts or tokens. I would say Age of Hannibal doesn't really have anything too bespoke. They do have the terrain cards, but you can print those off for free. If you're looking, Kentuckian's got his in sleeves. I didn't have mine in sleeves, and I couldn't find my laminating sheets to laminate them. But then again, they suggest you fold it over and glue it if you want and put it in a sleeve and laminate it. I ended up not doing that. We just had them face down, so you didn't get to see the pretty artwork on it, but it still worked. So I didn't have to go get anything extra to make that work and run through that part of the game. It uses very few dice. And I almost said that as kind of like an oversimplification, and I said I want to save it for later. And here, you can get away with a single D8 per player. They do suggest using a D10 for your morale clock, but you could use a token or any kind of other counter you want. So really, 2 dice. How many games only need 2 dice for the whole game to play? I might keep some extra D8 when you get frustrated with how one is rolling. That's what I should.
Man, the Warhammer players are never going to come to this game rolling buckets of dice. They're going to be like, what? Only 1 dice? What? That's ridiculous.
Now, some people might say that's a detriment because some people like to roll a lot of dice if they feel like they're doing more. But again, this is in that kind of simplification. The only thing I could maybe say is a gatekeeping that makes things a little bit more difficult is the rules I feel are really geared towards larger games. So that's like 1,000+ points. And that can be a lot. That's a decent sized army. And I know a lot of people commented on my stuff as I was posting that, man, like I could never paint something that small. And you do need a lot, relatively speaking, a lot of really, really, really tiny guys, I feel like, to have a proper game. And that could be intimidating. I was intimidated at first looking how many models, but then again, and there was a mind shift I had to make going from 28 to 6 in painting of the level of detail. But I was able to knock out an entire Roman legion in not even a full week. So I think that's more of a mental block people might have if they've never tried 6 millimeter. So yeah, going into cost of models, 6 mil is really really cheap. I mean, you can get like a pack of Victrix, which might give you maybe 1 or 2 units depending on how much you use them, is almost an entire small army in 6 mil. So the cost isn't very much compared to like the larger scales. You don't have to necessarily use a specific manufacturer, but it is geared to 6 mil. And I did find in my research that there aren't as many 6 mil manufacturers out there, or at least there aren't as many for every period. So, like I was specifically interested in Greeks, and I only found like maybe 2 or 3 manufacturers, and none. I couldn't find any in the United States, any U.S. manufacturers of 6 mil Greeks specifically, and Republican Romans. So that might be a limiting factor for people, especially right now with the tariffs affecting, which has been hitting the hobby space a lot as far as getting stuff from overseas for those of us in the U.S. But yes, you can play with other manufacturers. Little War doesn't make their own models, so there's no bespoke models or anything you have to use. They do have supplements and a second edition. Do you remember when the first edition came out, Kentuckian?
I do not. I do not.
We played on the first edition the first time we played, like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, maybe.
So
Maybe second edition had just come out when we played
yeah.
a handful of
So
years ago.
we'll say it's been several years since second edition. I don't imagine they're going to probably do another second edition unless they decide to just make more clarifications. I don't know. But a lot of the supplements they have, I think, are really good. They add to the game. They don't make
20.
it more difficult.
It says 2018.
For first edition.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what is that? 8 years, and they had a second edition after about 4 years. I think that's reasonable. All the supplements they've added are not required. It's not like some rules is like, well, you must use the latest supplement. The supplements are purely to add new periods, to add armies. And they have a supplement. You can buy a supplement for paper craft fortifications. They have a free supplement for paper craft buildings. They have a free, just like Ancients army list. If you want just the list, not specific armies, like with scenarios, they have a free scenario. They have one scenario you can buy, campaign. So I don't think all that to say, I don't think the supplements and the additions and the revisions are hurting your entry into it.
Yep.
They're simply there and available for you. And if you are listening to this having played the first edition, never trying the second, the errata is free and it breaks down all the differences. So you could go in there and see, okay, what changes? Am I happy with those changes? Because they do change things from like a D10 to D8. They make some small changes they talk about. So I don't think the gatekeeping is too much other than my biggest concerns are the sizes of armies can be a challenge or daunting for people who are not used to this scale, as well as finding manufacturers in your country or region for the armies you want to do.
Yeah.
So those are my two big ones. What about you, Kentuckian?
I think you did a good job laying out a decent things. I'm not going to rehash a lot of the stuff you talked. My biggest thing is I don't think a company can do more to try to help the player play the game by making things more easily accessible, by making the PDF. A lot of companies won't even do that. They're scared of, these guys are wanting you to have fun with something they designed. I mean, nobody in Little Wars is trying to go and roll in money because of this rule set. And it's a fantastic, for what it is, it's a fantastic set. But the thought being is like, I say that and I'm going to ding them a lot, right? But they do, I think they're doing about as much as you could ask a company to, instead of like coming over to your house and like gift wrapping you a copy of it to get you into the game. My thoughts would be in the gatekeeping is not limited to them, or at least I would say it would go back to their decisions. The D8 is not a common dice to have in your collection. If you're a wargamer, I had to go back through my tub and my other, like, I have a bunch of tackle boxes with different gaming aids and different systems, and I had to go to like a real one that I never go into to find my handful of D8s I'd bought a long time ago when we played Age of Hannibal a lot before. And so D8, I would say, cuts against them a little bit, but it's the right choice. And when we get into the playability, we'll talk about that. I know they say, and at least people have said, like, you could play this in 28 millimeter, you could play this in 20s or 15s. I think 15s would maybe be okay. I think to get the feel and what they're trying to achieve in the rule set, I think you got to play in 6s.
Yeah.
I think it looks right on a 6x4 and 8-foot table is what I played on. I think if you go to my space and my pictures, I think it looks right. I think there's probably 3 to 4 companies that are leading the spear pack in 6 millimeter. A lot of the Romans, if you looked at my, I posted on our Facebook pages and stuff, are from Rapier. A lot of my others are from Bacchus, and I've got a few other various manufacturers in there just to give me some different feel. And some of those manufacturers, just a note for the audience, is they are like head and shoulders above each other, that if you buy a Roman from Bacchus and Rapier, I'll just say one looks like Goliath compared to the other. So I'll say Rapier is a little bit bigger. I just like the way their Romans look. They did an awesome job. Most of my Carthaginians are Rapier as well. But getting into that, so I think like playing it at its zenith, 6 millimeter looks and feels real. And me and Wyndhurst have talked about this on, like, this is probably as close as we'll get to a chit game, right? Where we can't paint beautiful models. So I think that scale in itself is going to gatekeep a little bit of people, especially if you're in the United States and you've got to make orders. I wish we would have tried it. Again, us playing for a month and having busy schedules, we got a decent amount of games in to review the rule set. But I was talking to Wyndhurst about, we have some of the 3D print, like Pyrrhic STLs, and I wonder how those would have turned out in 6 millimeter. My hypothesis is not good, but for the people that have 6 millimeter 3D printed armies, come over the net. I'd like to see that. So I think there are some things that like will cut against it in a sense of just the scale itself, not being that popular, and the amount of models you'd have to have. So my Roman army, if you say it's 12, it'd be 14 infantry blocks times 24. I just want to do the quick math. I never do math in public, so the listener right now, I'm at my calculator doing 24 is what I put for like basic infantry, times 14 is 336 models. So that's 336 models, add another 60 guys on, you're at about 400 models for like what I considered a Roman legion to 2 Roman legions in that. And if you've got bigger horde armies or Gauls, you're going to have a lot more models. My phalanx, just because I liked the way it looked, I did 8 models wide and 8 models deep. It's 6 models wide, 8 models deep. It's 48 guys on one base. So I've got 6 pike blocks. They look awesome in 6 millimeter. They look, you like, man, that's the pike block going against each other. But man, that's a lot of models. 300 guys in just the 6 pike blocks. And, you're not even to your light troops, your intermediate troops, your cav, or anything else like that. So I think there's some things that'll be daunting about it, like Wyndhurst said. But me and Wyndhurst, I do not consider us 6 millimeter gamers. And he painted them in a weekend. It's not our normal thing, I'll say. And he painted an army in a weekend. Like, I think there's some things that might be gatekeeping that the normal community would at least see it that way, which is fair. And then I think there's some things that are just baked in based on what the rules are trying to replicate and the scale that will be a little gatekeepy. So just getting back to my score so we can move along, is I gave it a 7.8. I think it's just, and I don't think it's self-inflicted. I think they have done everything. You could not ask Greg and Little Wars to do more to make this game open, available, PDFs, free stuff all over their website, their battle reports, everything, the YouTube videos. like if you had all that, you couldn't do any more. Like they would be a 10 on their own. I think I'm giving them a 7.8 just because the scale itself, if you're not a 6 millimeter gamer, that's a bridge to cross. I think the amount of troops is a bridge to cross, and those things will be a little bit, but I still think that's a high score with not a lot of gatekeeping. You know, like the bespoke dice and those things, they really receive a lot less from us, especially, you know, companies are doing a lot more of that to protect their IP, and Little Wars are not doing that at all. So I think that's a good score. What is your score?
Yeah, so I gave it a 7. A lot for the same reasons. You know, I played a slightly smaller game, like a sub 1,000 point game, and that was still over 500 miniatures to put together. And I just happened to get a bunch of Greek from Bacchus when I was at Salute last year before I left, and you sent me a bunch of Romans that were 90% Bacchus, and when I was looking to kind of like fill out the ranks a little bit, Kentuckian's right. The difference at 6 mil scale between manufacturers is way more noticeable than the difference is at 28. So they don't always mix, and the quality different. Like, I think I would put. Obviously, I haven't seen a whole lot out there, but Bacchus seems very high quality compared to some others, which you might argue at that scale doesn't really matter. But if you're mixing manufacturers, it's a lot more of a challenge. And then, like, I put in an order for the boxes, 3 weeks ago, and it hasn't arrived. And that's just the challenge of right now for getting it from overseas. And so I think if we had distributors in the U.S., I might be a little more forgiving. But I dinged it just because of this, like Kentuckian said, because it's a unique scale that's not as popular maybe here in the U.S. And because of that, it's harder to get over here, and there's less manufacturers doing it, so there's less consistency across the range, I think.
No, I think that's a fair scale, and I want to move on to the next topic so we can glide through a lot of these because I think they're going to build on each other. And my only thought is there might be some artificialness. Like me and Wyndhurst, when you hear a review from us, like we try to be objective in the fact of like how is the shipping stuff affecting a rule set. I think it's like what are you targeting? The rule set to my I know they write 28 millimeter and the 40 millimeter bases, and yeah, you can play with paper models if you want. But I think if you're playing a historical war game, tabletop miniature game, the target for this to do it right would be 6 millimeter, and that comes with its own, I'll say, issues. So moving on swiftly, as Wyndhurst says, to playability. How long before you have the system? 1 to 2 turns or 1 to 2 games? Can you finish a game in 1 to 2 hours, a day, a weekend? Long setup, tear down, putting models out. Does the result normally fit the game or desired achievement? I think I'll be very quick about this. I think you can get the rule set down fairly quickly. I think there is not, you can measure a game on if you can play the whole thing off that's QRS, right? I tried to play the game off the QRS and I missed the Pila rules and those things a few times that I just caught myself on. I consider myself a veteran wargamer, but I would just say, like, you definitely can get it down in 1 to 2 turns. There's no issue with that. I know in some of their battle reports they don't go turn by turn. I found a limited amount of battle reports. I don't think Age of Hannibal is the most popular Ancients rule set ever, and maybe there's good reason for that, maybe not. But I would say that I wish there were more because it's normally fun to see other people like, hey, am I playing this right? Are they playing this right? And yeah, I think you're going to get this set down in 1 to 2 turns. Easily finish a game in 1 to 2 hours. Every game I played, about a half dozen games. I played a few solo, I'll say that, just to make sure I had mechanics right. And Wyndhurst started playing before me. And so he kind of, I would say, when we restarted this, he started playing before me. He tilted my brain to a few of the questions. So I wanted to make sure I had a decent amount of like, hey, am I getting this right or do I understand this mechanic? So I played even a few like solo small mashups. But I definitely think, yeah, 1 to 2 hours. We played a 1,000-point game with a brand new player. We totally jacked up the stratagems just on the PDF like we talked about earlier. And we had a lot of BSing, as in good war game has, in the middle of it, right? If it's a social interaction. And I want to say, like, with even talking out, I asked the new player to give me some kind of like feedback on what they thought of the rules with their first time touching the models. And like he was out of my house in like 3.5 hours. And that's the game, the setup, the BS, everything. That's pretty good. if you were on point, like you could play a huge battle in an hour and a half. Like I don't think there'd be any issue with it. Long setup and tear down, putting models out. 40 millimeter bases and 6 mil, not hard to do. I think that's pretty quick. I think it's quick and dry. I have my armies laid out in magnetic tables. Like I had the armies, me and the player in that 3.5 hours. We were like, let's play 1,000 points. What do you want to do? Well, I said, this is what a normal legion is, and we started mathing it out really quick. It took us like 10 minutes, like even to come it up with. So if you did any thought before the game, you'd be in a lot better shape. The terrain, which I want to get into, is like a special thing. I want to talk more than that into the mechanic and nuances, but even putting out the cards, like 5 minutes. Like that's a game before the game. And does the result normally fit the game or desired achievement? My only mention on this is it's fun, totally support it, love it when skirmishers, light infantry can whip the Roman legion's butt. They'll tell you they went from the D10 to the D8 to keep it more regimented, to keep it a little bit more flavorful, so you didn't have this unit of skirmishers rolling an 8 or a unit of light infantry rolling an 8 to a Roman rolling a 1, and you're automatically slaughtered, right? It's a double, you beat them by double the score and they're gone. And I just want to say that can still happen to some degree. It's narrowed, and you want it to happen to some degree to keep that tension, right? Like you don't just totally steamroll. But I will say that can add for some interesting dynamics. And if none of my games ever hinged on it, I think maybe in the past I've had a game or two hinge on it, and I just couldn't remember if it was the D10. So I just wanted to say that as a disclaimer. If a viewer or audience member has listened or played the game before, and they're like, I played with the D8s and I just rolled 1s and I suck and like my Roman legion was wiped out. The dice are the dice, but I still think after all of that and their changes, I do think the game will fit the result with the tension created on the combat factors and your natural die roll being added to that. Like I felt it was there. So a lot of big ups for me on this side. What about you, Wyndhurst?
Yeah, so I agree. I think 2 to 3 turns. I was playing with a brand new player who had never played it. He hadn't even had a chance to look over the rules yet, and like less than halfway through the game, he had a pretty good grasp of what he was doing. And our game took I think less than 3 hours. Now we were playing like a 650-ish point game. So even with my smaller armies, the longest part of the whole teardown setup or pregame is the terrain area section, because that's if you're trying to walk somebody new through it. It can take a little bit of time, but it is still fairly quick. Does the result normally fit the game desired achievement? The only thing for here is not below 1,000 points, because I think when you get below, while they include some notes and stuff to play the game below 1,000 points, I feel like that's an afterthought, and it didn't really work, because like one legion of Romans was like 8 units of infantry and 3 units of skirmishers, and the equivalent Greek army was 9 units of infantry and 4 units of skirmishers, and it was very easy for the Roman to get enveloped, and it just didn't feel like you had as much tactical movement. So I'm not sure that's really the sweet spot, and that's why I say earlier I really think you need above 1,000 points, so you need those higher model counts.
I think they say that in the rules, like 1,000, 2,000.
Yeah, 1,000, 2,000, I think is the recommended range. They do specify some adjustments if you're playing smaller size forces, which I wanted to try because I wanted to use just the painted models I had, and I don't think it's really the intent. While they allow you to do that, I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
So scoring, would you score it?
So for playability, I'm going to give it an 8, and my negatives on it were just kind of like what I talked about. I think it's an easy game to pick up and everything else. I think you're going to see how some of these sections are tied together. I think the teardown, everything else like that was great. I think because of how some of the mechanics interact, and maybe they weren't written in the book, I just think this goes back to the book a little bit, like what we talked about with the commander. we used, well, I just have to disclose to the audience, like we used some of the army lists that came from the Pyrrhic, like we scraped units out of there in commanders, so I didn't really have to face that. But I could see you running into some issues with that. I think I just don't agree with rule books. I understand they're trying to make a wide swath to tell you like, hey, you can play with limited points value. Here's our recommended. You can. They should put in there. You shouldn't. Right? Or you should play like this is the sweet spot. That 1,000-point game, 1,200, I think is what our games. Most of my games were like around 1,200. It, man, it felt that was the zenith. That felt
Yeah.
like the rule sets clicking and everything else and all. But I wanted to go on, and I apologize for diatribing, but my only point to this is Wyndhurst played half of that. He had 500 models on the table. So think about that when we get to, what from our earlier scores. I just think that like goes into, hey, 6 mm is a lot of
Yeah.
painting for those. But yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 just because I think it's a very playable game.
Yeah. I also gave it an 8. I didn't ding it too much for does it meet the achievement. Again, I just wanted to see if we could, and I don't think it is. So I agree with Kentuckian. I honestly think they should remove any of the suggested changes. Just play at a fewer points and just say you should play at 1,000 points or more, and just leave it at that. Because I think if you go into it trying to play fewer points, you're not going to have as good a time as you might otherwise have if you were playing with more points. So that's really just, I'm not going to ding it too much. It was more of a test of what they said you could do, and it didn't work. So moving on swiftly, as I do like to say, Kentuckian, who kind of broke down who gets what section, was nice enough to give me rules, mechanics, and nuances. This is always our kind of meat and potato. I'm sure we'll talk a bit on this one. So we're going to talk, is it simple, complex? Is it pages of charts or just a couple modifiers? Is it crunchy? Any game-changing mechanics? Any rules breakdowns? And what is the mode of friction in the game? So we have hit on some of these things a little bit already. Simple or complex, I kind of said this again already. I think it's simple, almost too much in some areas. But again, it's what their goal is, to be a simple set of rules. Is it pages of charts or 1 to 7 modifiers? It is definitely more on the just a few modifiers and just like one chart. I mean, literally, you have one combat stat, and then the only thing you might add or subtract from that is if you're in terrain or engaged in the flank, and then do you have any special weapons kind of rule. So on a single dice roll. So it really isn't a whole lot of modifier. It's just two, each rolling an opposed roll. That is really, really, you can't get a whole lot simpler than that. So it's not really pages of charts. It is it crunchy? It is the opposite. I think we've talked about that one enough, so I won't go into any more detail. Game-changing mechanics. So this is like big ones we've hit on in the past in other games is like the dice bag, dice mechanic in bolt action, or the patrol phase in chain of command. For me, the two big game-changing mechanics is first the terrain phase. Can I hold up the cards? I really enjoy that, and they're nice enough to give a tutorial video on it, even though I don't think it's necessary. It's a fairly easy thing to understand. But in my game, and we'll try and put up some pictures, or simply just go to the On Patrol Facebook page. We've both put up pictures of our recent games. But you get a hand of cards that's from a deck of possible terrain that you've put together. It could be clear, hills, woods, rivers, villages, towns, whatever. And then you take turns placing them after gridding off the table, and you're not even covering the whole table. You're just placing a few. And that gives you some authority of, do I want to put terrain that might benefit me or hinder my opponent? And they don't know what you're putting. It's all face down. And like my opponent was able to set up a nice kind of like river headwaters going on from almost his like left third off the table, and then a village, which meant he could quickly get up and have his entire phalanx row anchor on both sides. And it was really clever. And like on my side, I had put down hills to kind of guard against cavalry flanks. And so it's a really nice way to get terrain on the table without just being like, well, let's put some here. Because I feel like in a lot of those you get a little too balanced. Like we're trying to make it fair. So, and neither one side's got an advantage. So this is a really nice way where you could get an advantage, but not in an unfair feeling way. And then the second kind of game changing mechanic that I quite like is the morale clock. I do also think that's kind of the main point of friction, because it is otherwise friction. It's not like random who goes, it's an I go, you go, but you can only activate as many units as you have points on your morale clock. Or rather, that's how many orders you can give. And that's slowly ticking down. So as your army is whittling down, your clock's going down, your command and control is deteriorating, you can move and activate less units, and so you really got like, man, how do I spin these? How do I use my free movement the commander gives? How am I using this? And I think that adds some nice tension of where you're sitting there like, I've got too few resources to activate everything. So I do think that's a good point of friction and a good mechanic. Where they break down, the rules break down and don't make sense for me. Again, I kind of hit on this. The commander stats kind of broke down because I couldn't, unlike Kentuckian, we weren't using the pre-made commanders, and so I wasn't sure how to stat my commanders. So I ended up not giving them fighting stats because I didn't know and I hadn't been able to get in touch with anybody. So we never really got to attach the commanders to battle because other than he gives them free moves, there's no other bonus. And so it's like, I don't know what I'm doing with them. And I kind of felt like that was a breakdown in the rules. It just wasn't clear. And then some of the movement was a little confusing. As an example, if you have 9 on your morale clock, so you have 9 orders you can give. Orders are typically given to give a unit a movement, and that's pretty much all it says. One order equals 1 movement. So theoretically, if you have 8 morale points or 8 orders you can give, and you have 4 units, then you could move each one twice. But the rules don't say that. They don't give any kind of other guidance and things like that. So I don't know. That was kind of a breakdown for me, where it kind of felt there's parts where you just kind of have to interpret for yourself. Yeah. What about you, Kentuckian?
So getting into the rules mechanics and the nuances and everything, I totally agree with you. I think the card mechanic is absolutely amazing. I think the morale mechanic is absolutely amazing. These are game changers for me. I spent an hour talking to Wyndhurst about, like, how can I add this to other games? This makes sense with the tension of commanders, and if you don't just want to come to a table and set stuff out. Now, there's a cost to it. The cost is time. And that's why I think some game systems don't do it, is, hey, we've got to basically set up the table as part of our starting. Now, most of what you're setting up is like, you put down a 6mm village or a hill or some trees or a river or a lake. It's pretty easy. In my game, in that 3.5 hours, I bought some felt because I had a decent amount of terrain for forests and everything, but most of my rivers and stuff were geared towards 28mm, and I was like, for us playing this game and practicing the rules, I'm just going to cut out a 6mm lake real quick. I did that. That goes into me, arts and craft time, goes into my 3.5-hour game. It's absolutely fantastic. And again, a lot of the cards are going to be the clear, and it's building towards your opponent. And it's not so random as it's like, you have this grid when you start the game. Please watch their video just to see how it's played. But you have to build from your side. So
Yes.
that's strategic in the sense of, like, you're not going to know what the enemy's walking into. Like, you're building from your side, right? So in one of my games, I did a bunch of clears out into the middle of the board and put a woods out there to try to make the enemy maneuver around it, right? What you would have control of as a commander. And then, it's not just putting the hill on your side. That's possible, but there's some strategic value in it. Man, that adds a different level to how you want to show your army, how you want to fight at the advantages. You're going to a different depth than just coming up to the table with pikes versus legionary pilum. Superb system. I've never played the original Chipco system. I don't know if that was in it. The guys at Little Wars, they knocked the terrain cards out of the park if they've developed them that themselves. The icing on the cake on that is the stratagems. The way that you can take a ancient game where a lot of deception was used, scouts, goat paths, all those things. I wanted to play most of the stratagems in my lead-up games and man, they were just awesome. You felt like I was reading, you know, Herodotus or Josephus writing about an ancient battle in the sense of like, hey, here's you know, you could get through a goat path. There's that flank attack. There's the local guides came up in several of our games, or the ability that if you got the scouts out, I helped to discover. You know, I played a stratagem against my opponent in his flank attack, and I had scouts. I had to get some successful rolls, and then I could discover his flank attack. That was just bar none. I mean, that was so well done. Huge fan of how those guys did it. Awesome. The morale clock I like because in ancient games, we've talked about this with some of the other ancient systems we've reviewed, is you don't have the Singar's radio, the ASIP, where you can just tell everybody on the battlefield to do everything. So you did had to form battle lines, and that would be your one movement, right? You could move 8 troops at one time, 8 different squares, units at one time. That was one order, right? They were all connected. So that was great. But then as the morale clock was lowering, right, and Wyndhurst, I don't know if you went into it, but you're lowering based on who's scoring points in a half round. So if you've demoralized a bunch of my units that count that aren't skirmishers, I'm getting ticks, and they'll go towards, at the end of that round, we're going to see who has the most ticks, and that person's morale clock is going to lower, right? If you've gotten a bunch of demoralized against me, I've lost a bunch of units, regular units. I thought that was perfect in the sense of this ebb and flow, and you could sense of like the dire straits that you would be in as like, man, I need to get my morale clock. I'm losing this whole wing. Like I got to gain ground somewhere else because my army might be fickle, which definitely is reminiscent of ancient combat. Well done command system. Everything else, the commander having the ability to special lead one unit into combat, awesome. Every game I had, there was a Pyrrhus like cavalry charge to the center to try to lighten the load of my Pyrrhic units weren't doing too hot at sometimes, getting flanked by Romans. So man, that was so flavorful, well done. And then some of the add-on special rules with the commanders that I don't think Wyndhurst, we were talking about that you didn't add on. We just by luck picked a Roman commander, and I can't remember if it was a veteran special rule or whatever, but it allowed you to take 4 units with you in your move, like if you were given an order. And that was just real flavorful. Huge fan of that. Everything else, I agree with you wholeheartedly on. Definitely easy game. Again, I co-sign your rules breakdown. Very simple. Someone may consider too simple, but the game-changing mechanics, the morale clock, and the terrain cards are, I am literally thinking, how can I house rule the game cards into other games we played? Just as a way to get this. Me and Wyndhurst have played dozens and dozens of Hail Caesar games against each other on the same table. We love that rule set added some different scenarios, the version 2. But we've played games where it's like we play it by the book and we want some different flavor. And we have an whole episode on terrain, adding that to a game. So you as a commander being able to help pick the ground, I might try to house rule that into some other systems just because I love it so much. What did you end up scoring it?
Yeah, so I gave it an 8, and I think those game-changing mechanics, I think those put it up fairly high, because if, like Kentuckian was saying, if it's a mechanic that we like so much that it's worth going into other rules, that's really good. I did have some breakdowns and understanding some of the rules themselves and the way they were written, if they were too simple. And this is a rule set that they developed for their club, so they developed it in-house for their Little Wars club. They played it, and then they made it into a set of rules. So I don't know if it was a factor of I think we were talking beforehand when we did our interview with Chris that you can be such a wargamer that rules so well that they become second nature to you, and then you forget to explain it almost, or forget to pass that information on. So I don't know if that was the factor, but it did mean I was confused, or I wasn't maybe playing the rules right, or I didn't use a certain mechanic because it wasn't clear to me in how those rules worked or how they were laid out. So that dinged it a little bit for me. So for me, it was an 8. What about you?
I gave it an 8.2. I think the cards and the morale clock carry a lot of it. I think it's a very nuts and bolts, simple game. The mechanics are there. They're pretty straightforward. Not a lot of complaints from me. The special rules add that flavor. It feels like a lot of the ancient sets we play where it's a guy is a guy is a guy. Here's some rules that make him a better light infantry guy. Here's a rule that makes him a Roman legionnaire as opposed to a hoplite. You know, those things are pretty simple. I think the cards are carrying a lot of the water for me on just game changing. I think people will absolutely love that if they give it a try. Go watch their video on how to use the cards. I want to plug something here that we should have done in the earlier parts of the editions. I know we had made notes of it before, and we'd even talked in the past. But for all the videos of you guys to make, Wyndhurst brought this up, I think, a while ago with me, is the card mechanic is so easy. Why did you make a video of that? Make a video of the hand-to-hand fighting. Make a video of some of the special roles. Make a video of, a mechanic where they're going after each other. I do think some of those are straightforward, but the cards are even more straightforward. Maybe it was just a way to highlight your guys' awesome use of that. But yeah, I give it an 8.2. Cards and Morale Clock are awesome.
Yep. All right, you want to take us on the next one?
Yeah, so next one will be opponents, player community. We're, I know we're crunched on time. We're over halfway mark, but these last few will glide by. If I pick up this game, will I find a local opponent? Are the conventions that support the game near me? Are there local clubs that support the system? Do people house rule the system? If so, is it the same game with those rules? I think I've been into Age of Hannibal since about, 5 years maybe. I think either right in COVID or after COVID. I think when they launched the Pyrrhic campaign that they did on their YouTube channel, I really dove in headfirst then. Got the armies to really do Asculum and Herculea. Loved their videos. Watch that campaign. It's just good television, the way they do it. It's an amazing set. And then that system itself. But I want to get into the kind of questions posed. If I pick up this game, will I find a local opponent? I'm going to say probably not. I'm going to say this isn't something that is pretty. First of all, I think 6mm is not super popular as far as
in America.
At least in America, right? I know some people are out there listening with a big chagrin. I do not have any other 6mm stuff really in my collection, so I think it's going to be hard. Are there conventions that support the game near me? At a lot of the bigger cons in the States, I think I've seen Age of Hannibal games going on. It's a good way to play a big battle on a tabletop, and the rules lend themselves towards convention social games, I would say. So in the past, I've seen, I would say, one or two. I want to say I saw a picture at a Historicon not long ago where it was being hosted. Are there local clubs that support the system? I think Little Wars, if you get on their website, they're all over it. And I think as far as the campaign books, there haven't been updates since I think that Maiden Flood, but they're there. I think it can, there's a decent amount of support going in. Local clubs, I don't see that. Do people house rule the system? I just don't even see it enough to make that conclusion. I want to bring up a point that I think Wyndhurst will be a little bit better to talk about, but I joined the Facebook group, a long time ago when I first got into it, and I will say it's not very active, and Wyndhurst had messaged me during this, like, hey, I sent the group a request, but it's been hanging out for like 3 or 4 days, the Facebook group. And I said, oh, well, I can just invite you. So I invited him. I just don't see it as like one of the most active overall communities. So between that and player community, I would say if you're going to dive in, and this is something you like, I think, especially for fast play ancients, you're going to have to grow your own to some degree. I don't think that's going to be hard. I think the hardest part of that, because people, when they play this game, my buddy, he was all smiles. If you see the battle report I posted on Age of Hannibal or my Facebook page or group's page, like, he was wearing the Roman helmet, loved the game. It was really fun, he thought, but and he would play it again. I don't see, that being difficult if you have a wargaming buddy to get them into it. But when we talk about painting 500 to 1,000 miniatures, you're going to be painting 2,000. You're going to be painting both armies to get this game going. It's a shame to some degree. but I will say opponents and player community is definitely nowhere near other game systems. Not even close. What are your thoughts, Wyndhurst?
Yeah, so yeah, pretty quick thoughts as well. It's funny on my notes. If I pick this game up, will I find a local opponent? My exact words: probably not. it's, I agree with you, and that's off. That's considering the 6 years in the UK I've spent. At conventions, I feel like again I agree with Kentuckian. The major ones, I feel like you do see it. Again, because it is a really easy entry level, so it's probably a good convention game to run. At local clubs, I said maybe. I haven't really seen it, but it's one that a club could pick up relatively easy, especially if members have 6 mil. And do people house rule the system? And if so, is it the same game? So when Kentuckian mentioned on the Facebook page, I was looking back at some of the recent posts, and someone had a comment about a cavalry, medium cavalry, or heavy cavalry, the way they play doesn't feel right, so they had a house rule for it, and someone else was like, yeah, we do the same. I think it's still the same game because I think the writers at Little War would be perfectly happy with people house ruling stuff. Like, I've seen other rules straight up say, hey, make this your game, and I feel like they would have put that in the beginning of this one if they had thought of it. So I do think it's kind of the same game if you make house rules, and I've seen people talk about it. But I do agree with Kentuckian. You're going to have to do both sides most likely. Again, it's a step above a chit counter game. You could honestly print just 2D 6 mil armies, put them on 40 mil bases to test the game. To get people interested in it or to try it to see if your club. So the entry threshold is pretty easy that way. But it is also, like Kentuckian said, a fun game. I totally agree that if you have both armies and you introduce a player who's willing to try it, they're going to enjoy it and probably want to play it again. But otherwise, you're going to have to do a lot of that work yourself. So what would you give it then for scoring?
I feel bad about this, but I gave it a 6. I think that's a fair score. And Wyndhurst has already gaslighted me. I ordered 5 additional armies after we did our rules review and playtest. So I'm betting that, yeah, it may be an uphill battle to bring somebody to the table to play this, but I think if I get it and they do it, they will have fun. And so I just want to tell you, like, I'm giving it a 6, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is in the sense of I think the game will stand on its own, and we'll get more into that in the end. But, like, yeah, I definitely think it's going to be very niche, which is unfortunate to some degree, but, yeah, it's a 6 for me. What about you?
Actually, the same. I gave it a 6. But, like we said earlier, it is a good gateway, I think, into 6 mil because it is a fairly easy digestible set of rules. Like Europe being case in point, regardless if you end up using it with these rules or with other rules, I don't think you would have gotten into 6 mil if it wasn't for these rules. And then after going back to it to play it again, you got more stuff.
Yep.
So but as far as finding local players, yeah, you're going to have, I think, a hard time finding people who already either have the armies for it or are willing to play or build armies for it just to try it out. So both of us a 6. So number 7 is support from the publisher, creator, and the company. So do they provide updates and erratas regularly, new supplements? Do they keep the game fresh? Is the change normally good, or is the change too much? Do they provide updates and errata regularly? They do have the errata, like I talked about earlier, quote unquote errata. It is just a line by line summary of the changes, though, from first to second edition. So I don't know I don't think it's dated, but I would assume then that came out very soon after second edition, which was about 3 or 4 years ago. So no, they're not coming out with stuff regularly or new. They had the second edition, so after about 4 years, then they came out with another one. They do have supplements. They have come out with a couple of supplements that does give you some, more campaigns and more access to stuff. I would say that, does this keep the game fresh? I think they kind of really push that more on the player. they haven't given you tools and it's like, here, take this and run with it. They're not going to baby you and hold your hand and dump a whole lot of stuff on you like some other companies do, to the point where it's like, man, now in order to make it fresh and playable, I need the company to give me more stuff. I think they've given you enough of the building blocks that players can keep it fresh. So I don't think the change is too much, and it doesn't seem like any of the changes they made are bad. Again, someone who was really steeped in first edition and then went to second edition might have a different opinion, but my experience has been with second edition, and having read through the errata to see the changes, they by and large seem to be well thought out changes with good justification reason and good reason behind them. So I would say they're generally good. What are your thoughts, Kentuckian?
For support from the publisher,
Yeah.
I think their YouTube does a huge lift on this. I think it's almost the website and the army guide that you were even illuminating to me, the free army guide, so you can go to like a little bit more of the classical armies that they haven't done like videos on, or the Alexander and Achaemenian Persians. But I mean, like their campaigns, their 2 campaign supplements, the Age of Hannibal, like the Punic Wars, and then Magna Graecia, Return to Magna Graecia with Pyrrhus. Their Pyrrhus video, I want to say, like, just lit me on fire for this. It was like I went all in and collected those armies without playing it, just because I saw how much fun that was. The linked stuff, the linked battles. I think they came out with the terrain card video around that time, very soon. Like, that stuff is, most companies, I don't think are doing that. I don't think a lot of companies are. It's normally a YouTuber or an influencer or whatever you want to call them, people out there with a microphone, like these 2 schmucks you see on your TV if you're on YouTube or listening to, talking about it. And they were pretty on fire for, like, I think illuminating the really high highs of it. So that stuff is knocked out of the park. The other things, like you said, to come out with a new edition, and to point it, like, hey, we reduced it from D10s and those things, I think is there. But from the community, and if they're the proponent of it, from the Facebook group and maybe other ways that it's a good kept secret to some degree. And, maybe you can't keep highlighting your own rule set. I mean, I know they did a rules review of their own rule set, but like, I don't know, there's something there where I just don't see it as everything, but maybe fresh would be the best word. And maybe that's coming up with new supplements and like tendering it, gardening a rule set, which maybe I don't see them. They're busy. They even say that, right? They just moved shop. They moved. They did a whole YouTube series on that. They moved not too long ago. They are a war games hobby club, right? How hard is it to get everybody to play the same game for a while, and then when you're the proponent of it, you've got a million other irons in the fire? I don't know. That would be difficult, I would think. And I would say there's this, I think stale is too strong of a word because the game holds up, but there's something where they could, maybe I'd like to see a campaign book for Alexander or the successors. I think that would be awesome. I would immediately buy it if it was reasonably priced, which I'm sure by them it would be. But staleness is too strong a word, but I think it's somewhere in that vein.
So I agree. I feel like there's some missed opportunity. So like when you go to the page, go to I think it's like battleboxstudios.com, Age of Hannibal. They have a game support section of free scenarios, how to play videos, and a review. So they have some resources there. The biggest missed opportunity is the how to play videos is just the terrain cards and Siege Warfare, and that's it. And if you've watched Little Wars TV and you watched their campaigns, which are super inspiring and motivating to get into this rule set, they like short format videos, so they're not going into detail. You're not seeing like a whole turn be played out. So there is no tutorial or how to play video of how to actually play the game. And for a company that is it's a Wargaming's club that is probably the biggest YouTube presence, or one of the biggest YouTube presence for wargaming, that feels like a really big missed opportunity that should have been an easy lift and should have been done when first or second edition came out. Like, here's how to play through it and just do a small battle where you're running through full turns like that. That's something they could add that I think I agree would keep it fresh. So I gave it a 7 for me.
Hit the nail on the head. I was a 7 as well. So moving on, and again, these last ones we're going to go quick. We know that we've had you on here for a long time. Hopefully, you've been painting your army and not being distracted while you're driving or something or listening to this. But support from third parties. Do other companies support the game? Miniatures, terrain, tokens. To me, this is kind of a non-even starter. I think there's a decent amount of 6mm. Again, I'm targeting. I know what the rules say, but I'm targeting. This is a 6mm rule set in my mind. You could play it with paper models. You could play it with the 40mm blocks by themselves and ride on it, and that would be as close to a chick game as me and Wyndhurst would probably get. But I think 6mm is the sweet spot. It looks like the armies historically fought like the armies. I mean, it's there. So yeah, it's not bespoke. There's other companies that support it. The terrain is easy to make. Me and Wyndhurst, when we were coming up with this, and we didn't, again, we're not 6mm gamers. There's some stuff that I had from my other collections that could cross over. There's some stuff where I was like, hey, I want to have some of this on hand and maybe don't have the time to build it in the month that we were going to work through this system and game the rules. And I just used felt, and I was there, and it actually looked halfway decent on the table. So yeah, I think there's plenty of support. There's not a lot of tokens. You got the 1d8. You got the demoralized markers, whatever you want to make. Is that casualties? I did little wounded bases of like soldier 6mm models dying. Bacchus sells a lot of great casualties, so I had them painted. Looked great on the table. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of support. I just think this is not the game that requires it. If anything, I would think you're more beholden to the third-party companies in miniatures. If you want to, I think this is a little bit of a, we think about game systems where you need other things, or can you use other things? In my mind, if you're playing this game right, you're in the 6mm land. You can't play a war game wrong, right? But if you're playing it right or proper, it's a 6mm game, and I think you're beholden to those companies. So that would be my only thought. Wyndhurst, what about you?
Yeah, so do other companies support the game? I said no in the sense of this game specifically, and the reason I say that is my Bacchus miniatures were a Hail Caesar like pre-boxed set that Bacchus did. So that is Bacchus directly supporting another rule set. There aren't any companies out there that I'm aware of making Age of Hannibal army sets. And I agree with Kentuckian, this is a 6mm game. That is the target. And we've already talked about the limitations and variety and just options for 6mm stuff. I mean, I was even having a hard time finding 6mm terrain that, you know, I might be able to use for villages and fortification stuff. And it is just a more niche portion of the hobby. It is out there, but not in the volumes you see with other games. But I do agree with Kentuckian that because Little Wars doesn't make any of this stuff, you are beholden to the third party entirely for your access to everything. So I'm not going to ding them too much for some of these things.
And so I'll go first because I think I dinged them a lot on this one. And again, I'm trying to keep where I think the zenith is. Yeah, you could play 28mm on 40mm base. What do you got, 2 to 4 guys? Is that supposed to be your 100-man unit? I mean, maybe if that's your thing. I want the tabletop to look like that. I got to be aware with my bias right now. So in saying that, I didn't totally think that the companies were anti-Age of Hannibal, right? Even though you said like they have Hail Caesar armies and stuff like that, but they're not against it. And they say in the rule set, like, what is it? A unit's like 500 dudes, 1,000 dudes, 750 to 1,000 dudes. If you buy a Bacchus pack of like 100 guys, in my mind, that's 4 units. Like, that's easy. You know, you're up to 20, 30 units aside. Like, you're there. I'm still going to give them a 6 because I think that it's a niche market of the tabletop hobby, and I think they're not beholden to it, but if you are playing 6mm, you're beholden to them. So, you know, if somebody's played Age of Hannibal with the 3D printed STLs, at smaller than 15mm, I'd be very curious. I've seen STLs in 15mm. I know Plastic Soldier Company does the Cromartie Forge thing, but I'd be interested. So I'm 6. What are you?
Yeah, I have looked for 3D printed options, and there aren't a lot. I gave it a 7, and the reason I bumped it up maybe a little bit more than you is when I have looked at other rule sets for the scale, because when I first wanted to do Syracuse, I looked at all scales. I looked at 6, 10, 15, 25, and 28. And so I looked at a few different rules, and it does seem that in this scale, 40 millimeter frontage at a minimum at least seems to be the standard. So I think you're going to find a lot of the companies that make stuff for this scale are kind of going to be geared towards units and such that are about a 40 millimeter, either 40 by 40 or at least a 40 millimeter frontage. So I think that kind of helps a little bit. But yeah, otherwise I agree with everything Kentuckian said, and it was a 7 for me.
Okay.
Yep. So going into our last two. So number 9 is strongest reasons either for or against playing the game. And we put a little caveat here that if it's over a 5, we are recommending the game, and we try to list both the strongest reasons for and against. So my thoughts were, it does allow you to play a very large scale battle and get the feel for the tactics and movers that you normally struggle with to get in a 28 millimeter game for most of us. We're not all Yorkshire gamer and can do huge armies and huge tables. That's just the goal. They are very simple and fairly fast-paced rules, and the simplicity, I think, is what kind of hurts them a little bit. It can be hard for players, I think, that have years of wargaming experience, either just in generic in gaming or in specifically ancients, to kind of go to a set of rules like this, because you're going to find things missing in the rules that you're normally used to seeing. And so it's like you almost have to simplify your expectations for what the rules have. And that's something I've noticed with a lot of these kind of simple fast play rules is, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, well, they don't deal with that. And that can be a hard adjustment. And then, like we've said earlier, it's not, and even they say, they're not geared towards the nitty gritty ancients players. And so those individuals, even if they want to try it, they want to try 6 mil like we were and get in this, you might get some heartburn from that. But I do think it is a good intro into 6 millimeter wargaming, as Kentuckian is an obvious example with his irresponsible purchasing. So I think those are my simple reasons for and against. What about you, Kentuckian?
Simple reason for is I think even it has a low entry cost. I would say that for people that are ancient minded, and maybe because of either 15 millimeter or 28 millimeter, you're against it. I think it's not a horrible entry cost, and I think a 6x4, I played on an 8-foot table, and we played massive games, and we really only used the 6x4 of it, and you got that tactical feel. So I would put entry cost up there to some degree, because you have to be mindful when this many troops, even Bacchus and stuff, shipping is expensive from England, but man, you don't have anywhere near the money in these armies if you were trying to recreate them in a higher scale. So I like that. I want to say the tactical feel of ancient combat with the morale clock and everything else. I'll get a little bit more into that with the 8 factor, but I want to say the tactical feel of an overall commander from a large battle in the classical antiquity period is spot on. That's my strongest for it. If you want to get that game in 2 hours at a club and even play against somebody who's maybe just learning the rules, you'll get that feel. I without giving you a total guarantee, I really think you will stumble into that feel even if you don't want it. My strongest reason against is if you already like it and you're driving the period, you might want the more detail. And the more detail in whether it be miniature, you want this phalanx to be, or this Roman legionnaire to be from this certain period, it's going to be really hard to get that at 6 mil. The boilerplate add-on stuff that really adds to its playability is going to be against you to some degree. Now, not to say, just as Wyndhurst said earlier, you couldn't house rule some things to give you. I think this rule set even lends itself to being an easy bolt-on. But that would be my probably strongest for and then strongest against. What would you score it?
Yeah, so I gave it a 7.
Same, nail on the head. I thought that was average. I thought it was in the above average kind of category. So we'll go to the it factor. Or do you have you talk strongest reasons? So we'll go to the it factor.
Okay.
And is the game fun? Additional caveats not captured in other categories. This is where we really want to weight stuff. We feel that sometimes there's stuff that's so done well or done so poorly that putting it in that 1 to 10, we want to give that like 10 points on the end for us to weight things that say like, hey, this, even if the book isn't the greatest book in the world or this isn't whatever, this really gave it to us. Like this part of it helped carry the water. And my thought is I just got to go back to it and beat the dead horse. The terrain cards, the stratagems, the morale clock were the it factor for me on it. For people that I think do not like the gaminess of some of the other ancient like tournament-based games, or do not like the dice mechanic in Hail Caesar of the limbo, and you want a little bit more lined out, that morale clock is perfect for you. And the terrain cards are the game within the game. I put them on par with the patrol phase of Chain of Command or the dice mechanic in Bolt Action. And you're not even you haven't moved the first miniature when you play that part of it. But man, that is such a cool mechanic. I was even talking to Wyndhurst, as I've said previously, like I am going to try other games with somehow like house ruling that mechanic in just to see how it plays and to see if I can create some more dynamic situations where, again, sometimes, the Rumsfeld quote stands, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. The same could be said about terrain. Hey, we're here, we got to fight ourselves out of this way. But sometimes in ancient combat, especially if you read the histories, you'll see armies mirror each other. Or, they'll go out and ask for a fight, and the opponent won't do it. They'll go back, or they'll try to go to a different place where it's more advantageous for them. And I think this replicates it perfectly on the tabletop in a short amount of time. I'm going to go ahead and give my score right now for this one. I gave it an 8. I think those two mechanics in the it factor carry a lot of the water for this game, and they're done perfectly. Wyndhurst?
Yeah, so those were also the two it factors for me. I scored a little bit more generously, so I'm going to start with my score. I gave it a 9, and I dinged it for two things. The only thing, I'd like a half point for each of these. So for the terrain cards, the only thing I could see really being a detriment, like Kentucky and I are both run a lot of games out of our home, and so sometimes the necessity it helps make things easier if we have a table pre-set up so that when our opponent gets there we can run in because we might have limited time. And while this is a great mechanic, that kind of prevents your ability to do that. But it also means you need to have a good variety of terrain, even if you want to go the felt option, ready to go because you don't necessarily know what you're going to end up with. They do recommend tailoring your deck kind of to at least the region you're playing. So I think they say like, if you're in Africa, you take out more the water features, things like that. So I would dig in a little bit for that, but otherwise I think it's very telling when Kentuckian and I say, hey, we want to use this mechanic in other rules, that it's really good. And the only thing I would ding the morale clock for, because in my experience I was uncertain with how many moves I could give an order for. I think it's a great way to add tension, but because of how the rules themselves, I felt the ambiguity. I wasn't sure I was playing it correct, and I'm still not sure if I'm playing it correct because Kentuckian played it differently, and then people, when I reached out, and I haven't heard back from Little Wars, but otherwise people are playing it differently. So it's like, am I using that mechanic to the fullest and correctly? And I'm not sure because I think the oversimplification of the rules has left some stuff missing to really get me there.
My only caveat to that, just to Wyndhurst's point, is I think I'm almost dead positive, and we had this debate already on our private messages, but it was playing a smaller game, and so the 9 is a lot of movement for little, smaller, like half-size armies, and so 9 felt perfect where it would only reduce itself to be moved once. Like a unit could only move once, it would make sense. They can't light speed across the board. So I think that's the correct application. I'm happy to stand corrected if that's the case, but it made sense for me. But I do agree with Wyndhurst when we had the discussion. Like, I don't think there was black and white straightforward in the rules that allowed, that gave you a proscript reading of it.
And I think it's a perfect example of things that they take for granted because tactfully, and even with my opponent, none of us raced across the board with like a single unit. Like, oh, here's 8 movements, because that makes absolutely no tactical sense. So obviously you wouldn't do that. However, if you have 8 orders and you group yourself into 4 groups, which you can do, and you could even do in a large scale army, that's at least 2 movements.
Yeah.
So is that right or is that wrong? I don't think that's necessarily wrong if you're doing 2 movements, if you're like quick marching across the battle, because that's all you're going to get. But again, it's only half point. I still gave it a higher score than Kentucky did. So I gave it a 9 for it factor.
Okay, what's your total?
So total for me, I think it's a respectable 75. Gave 75% out of 100.
I have bought more models in this, and I've even got Wyndhurst, talked him into reviewing this rule set, and I gave it a lower score. I gave it a 73.5. The quick rehash is a 6.8, 8.5, or it's a 6. I want to go through that real quick, just because I think the rehash.
All right. So presentation, you gave it a
6.8,
and I gave it an 8. What the rule sets are trying to achieve.
I gave it an 8.5.
And I gave that one an 8. Gatekeeping.
7.8.
I gave it a 7. Playability.
8. I think it's top notch. It's good.
Yep. But we both gave it an 8. Rules, mechanics, and nuance.
8.2, and again carrying the water, morale clock, and drain cards.
Yep. And mine was very close as well with an 8. I just had a few confusions with the mechanics that could just all be me. Opponents, player community.
6. We both agree. Yep. This is a hard hold to fish.
And then support from publisher, creator, company.
7.
The
YouTube.
Both gave 7.
YouTube for me is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Their ability to get that, there is some staleness as we're years beyond the rule set, and especially for those people looking into it.
And support from third parties.
6. You're bespoke to the 6mm companies, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, and I gave it a 7 for most of the same reasons. I just graded a little more generous. And then strong reasons for or against. I gave it a 7. You gave it a
7. Same
as well. And then the it factor was a 9, and yours was a
8. And
8.
That's funny. Just to tell you how different we are on some things, right? A lot of people say we need to fight more. But I bought 5 additional armies for this rule set specifically, and it's even not my go-to ancient. But I just think, man, the things it does well, it does really well. I hope Greg and all of them at Little Wars are not offended on any of our comments. Really love their material and what they're pushing out, and I think they, with what they took in Chipco and to build, did an awesome job. And for somebody, if they're not totally involved in the period, I love the period, and I still think they did an above average job. So 70. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page. I mean, I haven't bought yet, but I'm looking at how I can give myself 2 nice size 6mm armies. I think if nothing else, like I've said before, it's a great set of rules to get you into 6mm, and I'll probably use 6mm with other rules for my go-to unless I'm introducing somebody else kind of into this scale of battle. I think this is my go-to of kind of like Bell Ludi is my go-to for a lot of like introducing players into certain periods. This is probably my introduction set of rules for like 6mm ancients.
Well, I think
talking about big battles.
This lends itself to club games too. This lends itself to 3 to 6 people, and maybe only 1 or 2 of you know the rules. Everybody will get it in a turn, and it'll be super super fun time. I'll push to you for our next segment.
Yep. So our last 2 real quick, we'll knock these out. So kick bag and then scouting report. So for this month's kit bag, this is just something that we use and we suggest. And so we just kind of did a broad case on this one. It's YouTube. So for me, what I'm going to talk to you is I like to go to YouTube when I'm painting specifically for inspiration, not necessarily for reference. So I'll do things like The Fall of Empires, I think, is one of it, where it's a long-form podcast with a lot of history about the rise and fall of a nation, or was it Kings and Generals?
Kings and Generals.
When I'm looking for like history about battles as I'm painting, I want the inspiration. Like, where are a lot of battles? I think YouTube's a really good platform for finding like history YouTubers to give me that information piece I'm looking for. What about you, Kentuckian?
I totally agree. The only thing I want to be mindful of, when we talk this, we we'll normally listen to podcasts or YouTube while we're painting or we're doing our hobby time, and it's a good time to like zone out, inspire yourself into what you're painting or what you're getting into the hobby. And I do think it's got a decent amount of resources on there. Whether you're watching somebody's specific YouTube channel, Little Wars, Yorkshire, a lot of gamers out there have them, a lot. And I do love digesting a lot of their content. If anything, you're going to get fatigued from how many YouTube channels there are and things out there, and whether they're worth your time. To include this one, right? Hopefully we are. We hope to be somewhat worth your time. But I would say the one thing I want to caution, I at least want to say use with caution, is with the rise of AI and everything else, I've seen a lot of channels that I think are just like pop-up history channels that if I know period really well, which again, you know, the knowledge and learning power, you get to this like plateau of stupid. And there's a lot of stuff that I still have gaping holes in. Periods I think I know very well, but I'll watch a YouTube channel or I'll watch something, I'll be like, that armor's completely wrong, there's some other nuances to that. Yeah. And when stuff goes to short form, like if you're watching a 15-minute video on you know, a battle or something like that, and maybe it's a guy using a PowerPoint slide and you're like, I think this is it, and there's stuff that's taken out of context, or just to make it more short form to get you to digest it, I would just say use at your own caution in that sense. There's a bunch of respectable channels out there. Wyndhurst mentioned a few. I think Kings and Generals is a go-to for me. There's the I want to bring this up right now because I think there's just a gazillion out there.
Little Wars. I mean, there's another one.
Little Wars. Well, Little Wars is huge, but I'll say Kings and Generals is huge. History March is huge. What was another one? Invicta had a bunch of good videos at one point. Obviously, Yorkshire, the Napoleonic Wargamer, the Ancients History guy, Flashpoint History, Longshot. They don't do videos a lot. A bunch of even YouTube videos that just do battle reports and rules reviews as well. I'll watch them just to, hey, what's their spin on this? What is their, you know, I like this guy's content, or I like some of the stuff he's doing. I want to see what he thinks about this. Von Kettering, Carl, you know, the guy that wrote Contact Front has a great YouTube channel. There's a gazillion. I'm doing a disservice by not giving you a
shout out.
Go ahead.
But I would piggyback on what Kentuckian's saying. There's a couple in Kings and Generals. They say this now at the beginning of theirs. YouTube has changed a lot since its heyday. And so a lot of our fellow wargamers, like this is not a business for us, right? This is a fun hobby doing the podcast, and we decided to put it on YouTube because it's so you can see our ugly faces. But there are people out there in our hobby space, wargamers or historians, who do rely on their channels. And if you like those channels and they are credible and they're some of the good ones, then the best thing you can do to keep them around, especially with the way social media is changing kind of against us, against history, against long format videos, is make sure if you are watching them to engage with them. It helps them stay relevant. It helps them keep being able to push out the stuff that we all love. So you can do that with us, but it won't matter. We'll keep doing it regardless because we don't rely on it.
We'll talk into the night sky when we have one dog listener left.
But those, you know, especially those people who maybe it is a tougher lift to get some of those long form videos out, make sure you engage with them. That stuff really does matter, especially in this day and age with the way YouTube is. So, and like Kentuckian said, there's a lot of AI slop out there that, you know, they're just trying to get views, and so they're not policing their own content. So just be mindful. So Kentucky, you want to take us to the final section?
So scouting report, we've had you guys for a while on here. You guys have seen, I got done 2 or 3 months ago. I said I'm giving myself 6 months to complete these 3 armies. My Caesarians were 90% done. My Fallschirmjäger were a third done, and my Pyrrhic were basically not even primed. 128 phalangites later, so big lift I've had in between now and our last episode. So that's good. I'm on a good upshot. and I look to have some more space to do some hobby time. So I'm going to try to, those 3 armies, I'm trying to keep consistent about getting those done and going back and forth. Our Bolt Action League has crossed over the halfway threshold. We've had 3 new people join. Jason and his son looks like they may join, and then we've had another guy join, so we're up to like 25 players, which is awesome. I love that league, and that's been very inspiring. Anytime you can smack talk with friends, it's going well. But I'm really, I'm trying to bear down, and Wyndhurst is normally a guiding light for me. We're soundboards for each other and accountability buddies. But, you know, I talked all this stuff. I went to a great history event, and I even saw another battle in a period that I didn't do. And I told Wyndhurst, I was like, I'm not going to mention it on here so I don't get shamed and flamed. Wyndhurst will flame me if I don't get it done before 2026. But I was like, hey, I at least want to, there's a project in a period that I haven't touched that I am going to be touching and wrapping my arms around at least the gray pile of plastic like all of us do. And we'll see if I can get stuff assembled and painted. And I say that, Wyndhurst is laughing at me the whole time I'm saying this to him because I have a whole box of epic AWI unpainted over there. And guess what? This is 250th anniversary of our country. But we do have a plan for that. We have a plan to highlight our country and its inception later on this year, more towards the holiday. But I've got some other projects cooking, as every wargamer does, and they see I'm a very squirrel. You know, go on the next thing. But hopefully, I hope when we talk again and I engage with you guys and you see some posts I've been doing about the progress on the Caesarians, the Pyrrhic army, and the Fallschirmjäger, you know, you guys will keep me accountable. And somebody posts every other day on our On Patrol Facebook page about, hey, Kentuckian, where's your progress? So that way you can just call me out and shame me on that. And then, again, still inspired by all your guys' stuff. DB Paints on Patrol, the stuff that you're posting, I have to give these shout outs because those guys are like grinding away and they are truly inspiring me. You might have it pulled up first, Wyndhurst. But Carl, first of all, Carl, love everything you share on your channel. Evil Ginger, love his stuff. Paints DB, his Dark Age stuff. Dude, this is exactly what Scouting Report's all about. You are motivating me with your Persians you've been painting, your Dark Age, all that stuff. Jeff, your Dark Age stuff is ludicrous, man. Jeff and Ashland, your stuff is inspiring me all the time. Truly love it. And a couple of you other guys that have been posting on there. Matthew Eddy, in March, he was showing that is Tokyo West, like the bolt action stuff he's doing out there. That was awesome. This guy named Wyndhurst, the stuff he's posting is all right. It's kind of mediocre. But yeah, love all the stuff that everybody's sharing, and it's really inspiring me on there. So keep posting on there. Throw up your hobby. Throw your assembled models. Throw stuff. Keep us accountable. Let's use that as our community fire pit. And I'm already thinking right now to take notes from definitely Paints and Jeff about how they're doing some of their faces. They're just unbelievable awesome. So that's my scouting report. Wyndhurst, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to give Kentuckian one ding. So wait, when we do our year in review in December, and I ask him, hey, what was that mystery project you never told anybody about and I know you've done nothing on? And it was March 29th when he said, oh, hey guys, I've got this project, and
I'm gonna assemble one model just to make you eat those. I'm gonna buy one model.
I am saying you'll have everything bought.
Yeah, that's.
I think you'll have everything bought by 26, and then you can tell everybody what your future goals for 27 are.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
Yeah, but
we'll see.
Recently stuff for me, I am going to paint some more 6mm stuff because I have some more ready to go. The same number of Greeks I've already painted, and I'm going to paint them up as kind of like a generic city-state, so I can either put them as allies to my Syracusans or as a rival city for smaller games. But since I realize smaller games isn't really where it's at, I'm going to initially plan for that as one large army of Greeks, and then build out some Romans to go with them. So I'll probably do 3 legions in total, or 2 legions and some allies. I think's what I got with Kentuckian's advice. And I have finished assembling most of my Syracusan Greeks in 28mm, as we talk about doing things in multiple scales. And so I'm not going to paint them yet because my kind of order of operation right now is I'm also going to paint up my next 250 points for my bolt action Australians. I have started on that. I've got like the first two colors done on them. So it'll probably go Australians and then 28 Greeks and then probably back to 6 mil Greeks. That's kind of my rotation at the moment because by then I'll be ready for the next 250 points of stuff. We did for our Bolt Action League extend our 500 point month through March because quite a few of our members are military and just operations stuff kept people busy, and we didn't want people to be rushed or feel stressed about anything. And just kind of the local community was having a little trouble. Some of our local players just getting games in. I think we've gotten all the games made up by now, so we're looking for vehicles for our first round in April. And yeah, I think there's a convention here in Rapid City, South Dakota in June, I think. It's like it's kind of like a Comic-Con almost. One of the local players said he ran some war games at it last year and was pretty well received, so I'm going to try to do that. Last month, I ran at a card show. I think that was before the episode. I might have mentioned that in the episode. If I didn't, it was a card trading show for like sports cards, Pokemon cards, Magic cards, and I set up a table and had a demo, bolt action, and some other stuff to show people our great hobby. So I'll probably do that again, just trying as I work on building the community out here in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. So, Kentuckian, do you have any clothing thoughts before I sign us off?
No, I just, again, to those people that are posted on the page, awesome stuff. To the people that are listening and viewing, like, give us your thoughts if you have gamed Age of Hannibal or some Ancients. We had a really good discussion with Hail Caesar when people commented on the page about Midgard and other things that we just weren't as familiar with and why they played it or why they didn't. So I look to hopefully the discussion is, I've always thought it just rises us all. Like whether you play a game and you either understand your like biases towards it, or if you wanted, that's how you try something new, is somebody has the ability to be like, hey, check this out. So I thought that was an awesome discussion. I look forward to if we do have any of those of Age of Hannibal, and keep posting that hobby progress. Like Wyndhurst grinding on those Greeks like really motivated me in posting the pictures. But PaintCB, Jeff, all of you out there that are doing needle lifting, posting on the pages and sharing your stuff, like the community is what makes it for me. And again, that's why we said we're not monetized in that sense. We're trying to keep ourselves accountable and help out if we can in any way to explain rules or at least with our biases to these people. And then really just look forward to what you guys are working on. And if anybody, my last comment is, if anybody is in the States is looking for the AWI aspect of like somehow highlighting 250th anniversary and those things, post that stuff. Like get me fired up that I can crack into those boxes, because I'm going to need it. I mean, these Ancients and World War II armies are weighing on me, and I've got that in the corner, but man, it's the 250th. Like I'd like to see some people's stuff if they've got it, and highlight maybe your past work. But with nothing else, thanks guys again. Please engage with us, interact with us, and again, comments, critiques, welcome. Wyndhurst, that's all.
Yep, as always, we really enjoy getting to do this and share things with you, and so we hope, Kentuckian said this is kind of a unknown secret set of rules, unless you've happened to follow Little Wars TV, and so hopefully we gave a perspective on it that gets you either in the door or moved on past it. Really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to educate. So without further ado, grab your spear and your shield, your musket or belt-fed machine gun, and join us on the next On Patrol. Dismissed.